The Porsche Sport Podcast, powered by Porsche Centre Leeds. Test drive the new Porsche Taycan and experience soul electrified.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1. The podcast will start.
The Porsche Sport Podcast, the only weekly podcast to bring you all the latest Porsche motorsport news and opinions. The Porsche Mobile One Supercar, World Endurance Series, Le Mans 24 Hours, the IMSA WeatherTech Championship, Porsche Carrera Cup, the 24-Hour Series, SRO Championships, esports, and exclusive interviews. Make sure to subscribe on your chosen podcast platform. For more information and exclusive news, visit PorscheSport.com.
Hello and welcome to the Porsche Sport Podcast. And today we have a very much an international flavour because I'm sitting here in our booth in Scotland. Luke Holroyd, our producer, is in Yorkshire, but Madeline Stewart, our guest today, is in somewhere far more glamorous, the Gold Coast in Australia. Madeline, welcome to the programme. Now, you have had a busy year so far with a new signing and a new direction for your career. Tell us a little bit about it.
Yeah, hello. Thank you for having me. I'm super excited to chat to you. So this year I've made the transition out of supercars in Australia and I am now heading into Porsches. I've got a really exciting opportunity this year because I have signed with Earl Bamber Motorsport. They are just starting up a team here in Australia and I'm lucky enough to be one of their drivers and partnering with Team Porsche New Zealand.
Very cool. And of course, we've actually, Earl has been on the show with us a few months ago and we actually joined him when he was in his compulsory quarantine in the hotel, having come back. I can't remember where he'd come from, but we had him pinned in his hotel, his hotel room to chat. Now, when did you first get chatting with Earl, and how did this opportunity come about?
So it would have been over a year ago now. It was actually Will that contacted both myself and my older sister Ashley about going and doing some racing for them up in Asia. So that was pretty cool. And I went to Sepang and did a test drive with them. And we actually decided to sign to do a year with them doing the Thai Super Series. That was going to be pretty cool. I was going to race as a support category at the Vietnam Grand Prix. So that was probably what I was most excited for about 2020. But unfortunately, none of that ended up happening due to COVID. So that's kind of where it all began, and we started building that relationship through there. And then now we have progressed to kind of chatting about Australia, which was a pretty cool opportunity that I was really excited about.
That certainly is. And how did you enjoy your trip over to Sepang? Of course, they're motor racing daft in Malaysia, and particularly motorbikes, especially. How did you find Kuala Lumpur? Did you enjoy the visit over to the city?
Oh, I loved it. I thought it was awesome. We actually also went to Bang Sen, which I thought was incredible. Completely different to anywhere I'd been in terms of a racetrack. I remember standing in pit lane, and their pit lane's actually like a hairpin. So they don't go straight past you. They come in and then they do like a hairpin and go back out on track. And you've got all the locals standing around in their jandals, standing right on the edge, pretty much in the way, or sitting on their like bamboo scaffolding, watching pretty much in pit lane the entire time. And you've got these Lamborghinis and Ferraris and Porsches trying to do this tight hairpin turn in the pits, dropping wheels into the dirt, all while trying to not lose any time in the stop. So I thought that was actually really cool. Pretty different to what I was used to, so I really enjoyed that. But Sepang was incredible, like to drive on that track, like nothing I've ever been on before. It's so long, and there was so much to it. I'd come from racing at Queensland Raceway. We've got 6 corners at QR. So it was completely different, but the Bambers were awesome, coached me through everything. But yeah, awesome experience. I'm very lucky that I got to do it, and I feel even more lucky now because I'm not sure when I'll get to go back.
Well, fingers crossed. Hopefully, it'll be sooner rather than later. And of course, it's for when we had Earl on the show, he mentioned that Malaysia was such an important part of that. Was where his career really got back going again. So hopefully, you'll be able to see now. You might need to translate for us. You must have to tell us what is a jandal.
I don't know. Do you call it a flip flop?
It's what. Oh, I thought they were thongs. But yes, we call them flip flops. Yes, but okay. I thought the word was thongs, but obviously not. So jandal is the term.
So I'm from New Zealand, so we call it a jandal. Australians call it a thong, and then I guess you guys call it a flip flop.
We do. Yeah. Yeah, so that's just so I remember when Scott McLaughlin, your fellow Kiwi, came onto the V8 Supercar scene, he made himself very famous very quickly for saying, "Give it some jandal," and when so that means someone else as well, I guess.
Yes, yeah,
yes,
that's right.
Not broadcastable. Now, Madeline, let's go back to the start because everybody has a unique story of how they got into motor racing. From what you've told me, you seem to come from a bit of a racing family. Where did your first experiences of getting behind the wheel begin?
Yeah, so I'm actually a third generation racer. So it's been in my family a really long time. It's pretty much all we know. My granddad raced cars, and then my dad grew up racing go-karts, building his own go-karts with his two younger brothers, and then went on to race cars. So I think the first time I ever went to a racetrack, I was 3 months old. So yeah, I've been around it my entire life. And then it was actually my older sister who begged to get a go-kart. And it took her 2.5 years to convince my parents because my dad said, no, it's too time consuming and it costs too much money. And Mum was like, don't be silly. We'll do one club day a month. It's not going to be a big deal. So eventually I think we were actually away racing with Dad. He was racing his car at Taupo, and he came home after the day racing, and Mum had been back early and she was like, don't get mad, but I've actually just bought a go-kart. So she did that, and that's kind of where it all began. So my sister raced for about 1.5 years before I started. I jumped in when she moved up from cadets to junior restricted. And I actually didn't like it at first. So I jumped in and I was just like, no, that's not for me, Mum. I'm not going to do that. And she was like, just give me 6 months. Just keep trying, see how you go. And then she just never asked me again. So I think Dad probably wishes that she just said, okay, we don't have to race, because it probably would have saved him a whole lot. But we've had some awesome experiences. So I then, I wasn't very good when I first started. I really wasn't. Probably for the first few years, I'd have a flash of brilliance here and there, Mum would call it, and I'd do something spectacular that would surprise everyone, and then I'd go back to just racing around the back again. And then after racing in New Zealand for about 5 or 6 years, we decided for some reason that we would start traveling to Australia to get better. We were still a little bit average and thought that the best way to level up was to race against better people. So then we started traveling between Australia and New Zealand every few weeks, doing the series in New Zealand and the series in Australia. I think at one stage in my racing, I was racing 1 series in New Zealand and 2 in Australia. So it got pretty busy in my last few years of high school.
Yeah, so you find yourself doing your homework on the aeroplane, going back and forth between. So
absolutely.
It's interesting you mentioned your mum there, because the stereotypical thing is dad is the car guy and mum is not. it sounds to me that actually your mum was the big driving force. I mean, my love of racing came from my mother. She's a complete petrol head, and I used to actually make her angry on purpose when she was driving because she would drive faster. I mean, tell us about mum. Does she come from a racing family, or where did that inspiration come? Because she sounds like a real driving force there.
Yeah, she absolutely is. So it's all of my family, like both sides. She didn't necessarily come from a racing background, but my mum's dad actually did sell cars for a while, so she did have a strong interest in cars. And then when she met Dad, she says that the only reason she dated him was because he had a cool car. He had a Sierra.
Good reason, yeah.
So that's apparently what won her over. So she's definitely been into cars, but she's a massive driving force for my racing. So she's the one that actually decided we would start racing in Australia. She's the one that's pushed everything the whole way, encouraged me to go into cars, make that next step. So yeah, Dad's all on board as well, but it's definitely an entire family thing.
Oh, that sounds brilliant. I mean, tell us about New Zealand, Madeline, because it seems to me that for me, New Zealand has had such an amazing heritage and history in motor racing since the days, Bruce McLaren and all the way through Scott Dixon. And I mean, the list is too long to mention it, but you guys come a bit like here in Scotland, you come from a small country. It's a long way from anywhere. I mean, just tell us about the spirit of Kiwi racers, because you guys have achieved so much on the global scale. What is it? What's that secret recipe that you guys have?
I really wonder what it is, but I think a lot of it, I've learned a lot having raced in New Zealand and then racing in Australia. It is very different. We are a small country in New Zealand, so I pretty much knew everybody that raced in New Zealand. We all did the same meetings. We all travelled around the country together. We had a massive group of friends. So for my first few years of racing, we just did it for fun. We didn't have the big trucks, the big marquees, the big team coach or the driver trainers or anything like that. We didn't use data. We literally just went and we raced, and then we kicked the ball around and have a bit of fun. And I think that's probably part of it, the passion. It's so important to keep that passion through your racing. Otherwise, I think if you push too hard too young, it can start to lose its sparkle a little bit. And so I really think that you can see the passion in New Zealand racing drivers. And I think a lot of it is that. I also think we've got some awesome tracks. And I really thought before I raced in Australia that I'd come over to these incredible facilities with these incredible tracks. And some of them are absolutely awesome. I loved it. But New Zealand have such a high standard for their go-kart tracks. They're so particular about the facilities, and they work so hard at keeping everything at such a high level. I think we're really, really lucky with what we have in New Zealand as well.
Oh, it sounds like it. I mean, and of course, yeah, like you say, there's so many people who have come up from that karting level in New Zealand to succeed on the global scale. Now, you've you obviously had a glittering karting career, and then went more or less straight from karts into a Super 3 car, which for folk who, a lot of our listeners will know what a V8 Supercar is. It's effectively a step on the ladder up to that. Just tell us about your time in the supercar paddock, because these are proper race cars. These with the big V8s in them.
Yeah, so I did make a big step. So I raced go-karts for a long time. I ended up in KZ2, which is a 6-speed shifter kart. That was so much fun. That's probably one of the coolest things to drive. I absolutely loved that. And then through the team that I raced karts with, I met Brad Jones, who owns a supercar team in Australia. And we spoke to him about a drive. So the car that I raced is a 2012 V8 Supercar. So the same as what they raced, just a lot older. So whatever they raced Bathurst, then it's really the same. So it's a little bit more raw than what they have now. I guess you could say. I was lucky enough to be mentored by Macaulay Jones, and I also had a lot of help from Nick Percat. And whenever they jumped back in my car to help me a little bit after being in their race car, they couldn't believe how hard it was to drive. But I remember the first time I drove it. So I'd never driven any other race car before, and I'd got out of this little go-kart into a V8 Supercar, and BJR were just like, just jump in, you'll figure it out. Like, don't worry about it. Pretty much, here's start, off you go. And I was like, okay, like a little bit nervous, but out the gate. And I just remember when I accelerated out of pit lane, like 650 horsepower, I was like, oh my goodness, like you could feel it. It was unbelievable. And that was pretty cool. Like, even Dad, you could see he was pretty proud in that moment. Something I think he would love to do is drive a V8 supercar. So very cool day.
Did he ask, did he get a shot in it while you were doing it? With the testing or anything like that?
He hasn't yet, but Brad has definitely said that when he's keen, he's more than welcome to jump in. So I think at some point he'll have to take him up on that.
You've gone from no stranger to big horsepower, then going from that, and actually the Porsche must be like a sofa compared to the supercar. But the thing for me is that what boggles my mind about the supercar is how heavy they are. I mean, for our American viewers, it's about the same weight as a NASCAR Cup car. I think a lot of people don't realize how heavy they are. I mean, what was it like? I mean, I know the power must have been incredible, but going from a go-kart to a car that weighs 1.5 tons, I mean, how did you manage the weight of driving the car as well?
Yeah, it was completely different. I had to learn so many new skills, and also I had to train really hard. I think the biggest thing I noticed was the heat. Jumping was about 60 degrees inside the car. And yeah, I think that was probably a massive thing I learned. I remember I did 2 days in the car and I was just ruined. It was really hard work. Not to mention my brain, after getting into something new and having to learn it all again at such a fast pace, was really challenging. It was exhausting, but you then start to get used to it. I learned a lot about weight transfer. We don't do so much about that in a go-kart. So then to feel that in the race car, and you really feel the way you as a driver can impact the way the car handles. And I think that was probably the biggest thing I learned from the supercar, because now I know that you can't really just wing it. You really have to have the technique right. Otherwise, the car doesn't perform the way that it's supposed to. And even the best engineer in the world can't tune that out. So that was probably a really good skill that I've learned that I'll definitely transfer over to racing the Porsche.
Absolutely. I think it amazes me how when you see big names from all around the rest of the world of motorsport go down to Australia and race in a V8 supercar, and they have their head blown off. They just go, I thought I was a brilliant racing driver. This thing is just making me. They are animals, aren't they? Now, I wanted to touch on fitness, because of course I believe that you're already into business ownership. You have your own gym. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so I just opened up my gym here on the Gold Coast about 3 months ago now, I think. So it's called Fit Shop Labrador. Yeah, we're pretty new. So it's been a challenging process, but super exciting. So I have a huge passion for health and fitness. I first started training with a personal trainer when I was 12, because I moved up a class in go-karts and I couldn't hold my head up. And I went from being in an assisted class to a non-assisted class, which meant if I spun out or crashed, I had to be able to move my own go-kart off the track. Mm-hmm. And because I was so small, I had a lot of lead on the go-kart. So I really struggled to move it off the track, which became unsafe. And Mum, again, pretty much said to me, if I can't move it off the track by myself, then I can't race because it's not safe. So I started going to the gym, and I've never stopped training since. And then I moved to Melbourne in 2019, and I had originally planned on studying engineering at university, but I decided it was probably going to be a little bit too much with the racing, the way that it had picked up. It was my first year of Super 3, so I thought I'd just take a gap year, and I decided to do my Cert 3 and 4 in fitness and get qualified. And I really just thought I would do that out of interest for my own personal training and just learn more about the body so that I can better myself. But I just fell in love with it, and I really, really loved training and learning about it. I love the science behind it. And so then when we decided to move to the Gold Coast, Dad was looking at businesses, and I pitched him the idea of opening a gym. We originally looked at buying one, and I said I'd actually like to start one up from scratch instead of buying one that was already done. So once I provided him with enough information that made it worthwhile, he agreed. So we've opened that together. And we've been opened about 3 months, and it's going really well. I love it.
Oh, fantastic! And it's what have been the biggest eye openers as a business owner alongside being a racing driver?
I'm a lot busier than I thought I was going to be. I'm a busy person, so I knew it'd be a challenge, but I really like to have lots of stuff to do. I hate to sit around and do nothing, so I thought it would be a good challenge for me. But I think I underestimated the little admin things that have to be done, all of those extra little things, those messages that you have to respond to, keeping everybody happy all the time. In a good way, I really love it, but I definitely underestimated some of the little things that have to be done that take up quite a bit of my time.
I find that but that's one that I love doing what I do with in the motorsport media side, and then all of a sudden you've got to do your tax return or do your expenses or do whatever, and you're like, oh, thought I'd escape that, but no. Now coming back to the Porsche world, you've had a few runs in the Porsche Cup Car so far, and I've got a busy year ahead with it. Tell us about your initial impressions of the car, because they're raced all over the world. They make an amazing noise. They're very typically a Porsche, the engine right in the back. Tell us about your experiences so far with the car.
I loved the Porsche as soon as I jumped into it. So it was actually funny. I was really set on the Supercar, but my sister Ashley was quite interested in Porsche racing. So she went out to the track at Winton to do a test day, and I just went as well. And while she was having a break, they got me to just jump in and have a go. And I came in and I was like, okay, wow, that's pretty fun. I really enjoyed that. But I continued on with the supercars, but I've always definitely really loved the Porsche. I love the grip, the high speed cornering. That's probably a bit more of my driving style than in the supercar, is a bit more stop-go. I definitely like carrying the corner speed. That was one of my strengths in go-karting. So then to be able to really use that again in the Porsche has been a lot of fun. And then I, a couple of weeks ago, actually got to take it to Phillip Island and do a test day there. And I've been so excited about that because I loved Phillip Island in the supercar, but in the Porsche, it's just epic. Like, it's the coolest track car combo. That was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed that.
That Phillip Island I'm a huge MotoGP fan, and Phillip Island has got to be, that's one right at the top of my bucket list to go and visit as well. It's what sort of speed are you pulling into turn one in a cup car through there? Because it's so quick going through dunes.
Yeah, I think it's around 270. So it's pretty fast. It's because it's a fast corner as well. It's so it's pretty fast, but yeah, awesome track. Definitely you should go. It's very cool.
And that's about 160 miles an hour, roughly 170 maybe, roughly thereabouts. Yeah, I'm trying to do the calculation. Fast enough. Now, what's tell us about the season ahead with the Porsche. I mean, what tracks are you going to? Does it go along with the Supercars paddock, or tell us about the season that you've got ahead with Earl Bamber Motorsport?
Yeah, so it doesn't go along with Supercars. We're actually racing with Shannon's, which is cool. I was meant to race a couple of weeks ago at Phillip Island, but Melbourne had another little COVID situation, so it got postponed. So it will be not this weekend coming, the following weekend. So I have that first up. I also get to go to Sydney Motorsport Park this year, which I also really like that track because, again, turn 1 is very cool. Another one I'm excited to go to. I've been there in the supercar, but I think it'll be a lot of fun in the Porsche. We've got a few other rounds, but I'm probably most excited that I get to do a round at Bathurst. So that'll be later on in the year. Very excited to head there.
That is another absolutely. Of course, we had Luke and myself on the show, and we do quite a bit of sim racing, and it was the Bathurst 12-hour virtual version on Saturday. And I'll not bore you with how it all went wrong very quickly. Of course, it can on the mountain. Have you driven at Bathurst before?
No, I haven't. I will be going there on Easter weekend to race at the Bathurst 6-hour, which will be my first laps around there. So that's pretty cool and good to do a few laps there before I head there in the Porsche at the end of the year.
And a lot of drivers now with the talking about sim racing, a lot of drivers now have a sim in their home and use it for some for fun, some for other things. I mean, first of all, do you do the sim racing thing, and also how useful is it? For example, for something like Bathurst where you've never driven it before, how useful or not do you find it?
Yes, I have one. It's just sitting over there next to me. We did a lot of sim racing during COVID, so it was very cool to have that during the time. It was actually a lot of fun to play around with that a little bit. I think it's going to be an awesome tool for me, especially heading into Bathurst. I think the most useful it is when you haven't been to a track before, to learn it. And it is so realistic in the sense that when you turn up to the track after doing it on the sim, you do kind of feel like you've been there before, which is a really big help going into your first session. Things do feel a little bit different. There might be a little bit more elevation than what it felt like on the sim, but it definitely helps to have a rough idea of how hard you can go into corners, braking markers and cornering speed, stuff like that, just to get used to the track before you arrive. So yeah, I love it. It's something I should probably use even more than I do.
You're too busy running your own business or to be sitting on the sim. Now, of course, Porsche has such a clear path of where it can take you. You look at somebody like Matt Campbell, for example, who came from the domestic Australian Porsche Cup, and look at him now, is racing all around the world. I mean, where do you want this kind of journey to take you? Where's your, I'm sure you have long-term goals about where you want to get to. Tell us about them.
Yeah, I still have a massive passion for V8 Supercars. So there's a lot of changes happening in Australia at the moment with the V8 Supercars, looking at the Gen 3 cars. They're even looking at going maybe paddle shift, and it's going to be a little bit more similar to a GT style car. So we'll kind of see what happens there. But I would love to race in Europe. I think it'd be awesome to do some Super Cup. I'd really love to do a little bit of that. My ideal would probably be to race in the V8 Supercar series and then be able to race all over the world, doing maybe a few endurance races or just kind of some more wild card events on top of that. But to be honest, as long as I'm racing something somewhere, I'm pretty cruisy about it. I just like to race. So wherever it takes me, I'm happy to go.
I like that. Now, the final question, Madeline, and this is something we ask absolutely everybody who comes on the show. We call it the Racing Genie. So you have 3 wishes where you can race in any track you like or any race you like, in any car and with any teammate. Now, Earl, for example, he chose Dale Earnhardt at Daytona in a NASCAR, which tells you everything you need to know about Earl's secret passions. What would your choices be for that?
Oh, anywhere. I would love to race at Monaco.
Okay.
I would just think that's an awesome track. I would love to go there. There's a whole heap that I could list, but I definitely think that would be up there on my list. Anything, I think the Porsche would be pretty cool there. One day I'd love to drive a Formula One car. Obviously, I think that most racing drivers would have that on their list, but probably a Porsche. And I guess as a teammate, I really rate Earl. I'd love to race with Earl Bamber at some point. I've actually been in the car with him for a hot lap, and don't tell him, but he's pretty incredible.
Yeah. he would never say so. He seems very modest. But yeah, he is. He's quite what a guy to learn from. Interesting. You almost had the same answer as Larry Ten Voort, the current Super Cup champion. He came on the show and he says in his Super Cup car at Monaco, he says qualifying lap, he says, well, he said something after on air, which I won't repeat, but he said it is amazing. He says it's just so. Well, hopefully, if we can get you up to the Super Cup, then you'll hopefully make that dream will come true.
Yeah, I hope so. I think that'd be pretty awesome.
It would be. Well, Madeline, thank you so much for coming on to chat to us on the Porsche Sport podcast. We wish you all the best of luck for the 2021 season, and we'll be keeping a close eye on the progress and looking forward to having you again very soon.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
The Porsche Sport Podcast, powered by Porsche Centre Leeds. Test drive the new Porsche Taycan and experience Soul Electrified.